Hi, I'm Christopher Friedl, here with the Texas Blockchain Summit, and with Alta 3X, work with DLTX, David Johnston, and chasing down some stranded energy. We're here right now with Ryan at Titan Mining, and can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Ryan Condron, Titan Mining. So currently what we're focusing on is just building a better mining pool. So we noticed a huge gap in the U.S. market for just needing, or in the global market, actually, essentially, needing better mining pools. So we started writing super low-level code about 2 years ago, wrote a highly optimized system, and now we're really just spreading the gospel of running your own mining pool. We really believe that any at-scale miner should be running their own pool, signing their own blocks. And then we're also sponsoring a decentralized protocol called Lumerin, which is meant for hash rate routing and decentralized data routing.
Do you, when you say better mining pool, what does that mean to you?
It's this idea of not just copying existing code bases, but really taking the time to write a highly optimized code base. And then, so that's step one, is just better code.
Yeah.
Step two is better transparency. This idea that historically a lot of mining pools have been kind of black boxes. I'll say a lot of times that miners are some of the most trusting people and the most paranoid people all at the same time, where they will protect their wallet keys and they'll protect their mines and they'll lock down their networks, but then they'll send their hash rate, their actual production, to this black box pool that really has no transparency to what their balance sheet looks like, what their payouts look like, what their reserve looks like. Historically, a lot of these pools, like, you literally have to hunt through a lot of like question and answers or like help sections of the pool just to find out what fee you're paying. A lot of our stance for Titan is to provide more transparency in pool mining.
More clarity. We were talking a little bit before we came on camera here, and what percentage of the pool is controlled by what entities, and how decentralized are the pools at this point? I'm gonna put you on the spot there. You don't have to say specific entities or anything.
I mean, so the elephant in the room in Bitcoin mining is that the overwhelming majority of the blocks are created by 3 entities right now. And if you actually really boil it down, it's more like 2. And that means that the majority of the transaction processed on the world's largest decentralized cryptocurrency network are processed by 2 to 3 entities. That means that if these 2 to 3 entities want to adopt a blacklist, or governments put pressure on them to do some type of censorship, one, it would be hard to identify if there is a censorship happening, where you would actually have to be monitoring the mempool and seeing pools not picking up those transactions. And two, it's if they want to vote on a new protocol adoption or whatever, they have a lot of sway. So it's kind of like this unspoken thing where it's one thing to have this proof of work decentralized ecosystem where you have a bunch of miners and the miners are distributed all over the world, and we say these miners are protecting this decentralized ecosystem, but then they send the very compute power that's supposed to protect this decentralized ecosystem all to the same bucket and to the same processor that's going to use that compute power how they will.
So it's max decentralization on one hand, and then centralization. Not necessarily centralization, but there's an attack surface or a weakness within the ecosystem.
Yeah,
that has grown.
So what we forget is distributed and decentralized are 2 very different things, right? Decentralized is about the decision maker. Distributed is about geolocation and fault tolerance around where things are located. So as far as proof of work mining, our machines and our ability to create hash rate is very distributed. We have it all over the world, mass amounts of quantities on different grids in different countries. The problem is it's not as decentralized as we think it is when it comes to actually producing blocks. And anyone can go to any block explorer and see that it's the same entities signing blocks over and over and over and over. The real vision is that every large miner around the world, if they were running their own pool, signing their own blocks, then we would truly have a more decentralized system.
Why should a miner care right now? If someone is, they're looking at saying, hey, I'm increasing my P&L. I'm going public. I'm publicly listed. Why should they care? If they're sending it to the pool and they're getting the revenue back, why does it matter?
See, so this is
why does it matter to them?
No,
why does it matter to the individual?
This is the hardest thing, because centralized systems at their core are more efficient, more optimized, and at times more profitable. So why does everyone mine against one of these large pools? It's because everyone else is mining against those large pools. It becomes very safe because you're now sending your hash rate to a safe, large entity that people know who they are, you can trust them, and you're going to get your payout. For a large publicly traded miner, you have to have consistency in payout. You have to be able to trust that your revenue is going to be, and anyone that's investing in that large entity is trusting that large entity that they're going to have certain revenue and profitability targets, and that's based all on having a solid pool partner. So there's comfort and there's safety in staying with a large pool, right? Now, your question was, why does a miner care? Well, for the ongoing survival of these decentralized ecosystems, we have to be able to stay, we have to stay censorship resistant, right? And we have to stay trustless. So in order to stay censorship resistant, we need to be able to take any pool offline at any moment, any miner offline at any moment, and still process transactions in a timely, orderly way, right? So right now it's about every 20 or every 10 minutes. So if I can take off the top 3 pools and still process blocks every 10 minutes, if I can drop the top 3 miners in the world and still process blocks every 10 minutes, that's true decentralization, that's true fault tolerance. And that's for the survival of the ecosystem. So that's really what we should be targeting.
So that's on the ecosystem side. You mentioned some in the past some benefits for the individual miner as far as information asymmetry that some of the pools have on the individual miners. What does that look like?
Ask that again. Sorry.
No. So it's like you were talking about the pools haven't get information that are getting information from the publicly traded miners prior to that being.
Oh, this was from our discussion before. Yeah. So, when we're talking about this idea of like why would someone want to run a private pool? Well, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. One is if you have a large publicly traded miner. And they are mining all against one pool, that means you have a large institution that is getting their revenue from one source, right? And if that one source, for whatever reason, stops withdrawals, becomes untrustworthy, something happens in the market, now all of a sudden, all your eggs are in one basket, right? Yep. So that's number one. So some miners they'll have like several pools. They'll have failovers, like pool 1, pool 2, pool 3, and they'll have failovers. So one is don't put all your eggs in one basket with one pool. The other reason for having your own pool is this idea of how much is your data worth to you, right? When you're actually sending your hash rate to another entity, they know exactly what your revenue is. They know exactly what your uptime is. They know when you're bringing new miners online. They know when you're not going to hit targets. These third-party entities actually have all your financial data technically before you do. So as a publicly traded company, that could be somewhat problematic.
Disturbing for the if you're giving your secrets before to someone else, they can use it to their advantage if they want to. And so it's really about taking back over control over your own information as the publicly traded miner. If they're running their own pools, being able to take that and put and keep that hidden from someone else.
It's protecting your own data. It's protecting your own information, and at the same time, you're signing your own blocks. You're actually able to put in the Coinbase transaction. You're able to sign your own signature, put your own company name. It's street cred. It's some of the world's largest miners right now. They don't have any street cred. They don't have a single block with their name on it, and they could grow to multi-billion-dollar companies, and then they could wither and die, and there's no reference to them anywhere on the blockchain that they ever actually produced or contributed to anything.
They just were part of the ecosystem for a bit, and then they went away,
Yeah,
and now
it's kind of a rough legacy. So when pitching this idea of private pools, we'll tap on that in a little bit, and even from a marketing standpoint, and say, hey, like, where's your street cred? How many blocks have you signed?
Where's your street cred? How much information are you
Yeah.
giving to your competitors? And if someone doesn't care about giving their information to their competitors, or someone else having access to that, it kind of speaks to their business model.
Yeah.
How on top of it.
Yeah, so we're a big proponent for any at-scale miner running their own mining pool. We really believe that that's a true model of decentralization that we should see in Bitcoin. Not saying that there shouldn't be public mining pools, but we really think 5 years from now, public mining pools are going to be a very small majority of the hash rate.
What do you see as the ideal size for doing these mining pools that Titan is helping set up?
It's really up to the risk of the mining company itself. So if you're comfortable getting 1 block a day, then anywhere from 800 petahashes to an exahash would be about sufficient for a block a day, a block every 1 to 2 days. If you're comfortable with getting 1 payout a week, then you can cut that down 200 to 300 petahashes. You'll get about a block a week. So it's really just in the profitability calcs around the difficulty of the network. It's what are you comfortable with of getting a payout? If you're comfortable with only getting a payout once a month, and you're willing to go that timeline to find a block, then you could mine with as little as 100 petahash.
Now, I guess that's also where the offshoot, the other things that you're building with the ability to take hash rate and monetize that. Is that through Titan, or is that with?
So the Lumerin project is an open source protocol that we're working on, and it's this idea of a peer-to-peer hash rate fulfillment. This idea where you have a seller and you have a buyer, and they don't need to know each other, they don't need to trust each other, but you can actually transmit a digital commodity between them, where you use a smart contract with encrypted routing information and as an escrow to facilitate the engagement between the seller and the buyer. So essentially what this would look like is you run a Lumerin node inside a mining facility, you route the hash rate through the Lumerin node, and the Lumerin node just acts as a pass-through where the hash rate goes on to whatever their default mining pool is. And the seller or the miner will post contracts in this open marketplace. Now, if a buyer, a financial institution, another miner, really a pool, anyone that wants to purchase hash rate, they can then go to the open marketplace, they can purchase hash rate, and when they post their payment to that smart contract, it's held in escrow, and the seller picks up the seller's node picks up the order from the smart contract and immediately begins routing the hash rate directly to the buyer. So we're not dealing with a security at this point, we're actually dealing with a true commodity that when you buy, you can take delivery of it. And then it's at the will of the buyer now what they do with that hash rate. They could mine Bitcoin, they could mine Tiger Coin, they could mine Bill Murray coin. It doesn't matter.
Bill Murray coin,
which is a real coin, by the way.
You learn something new every day. Yeah, I guess that allows for the offset of the risk of for if you have lower hash rate, being able to offset that risk of not producing, because it then becomes just there's a market price for hash rate at any given point in time.
If you think about it, if a power producer, if a power producer's entire business model was they produce power that they're going to use themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And you think, well, that's a huge amount of risk for a power producer, because what if they don't use that? What if they can't use the power? Then they're ramping down. They're running at half load or whatever. So what a power producer does is it tries to produce as much power as the grid is going to use, and that's their business model. They're selling off the power, and that's where they make their money. They're not using the power themselves. Likewise with hash rate, you have people building these massive facilities, and they're taking all the risk on themselves that they're going to use this hash rate themselves, and they're at the whims of the market, where if the difficulty goes crazy high, if the exchange rate goes crazy low, now they can't pay their power contracts, they can't meet their OPEX obligations, and they're taking on all the risk because they're borrowing the money. But if we really treat these mining facilities as a utility where they're creating the hash rate and they want a buyer for that hash rate 100% of the time, then we really need what we would call a global hash rate grid, where they immediately are producing hash rate and they're putting it immediately onto the open market to the highest buyer. And it could be someone in Brazil or Europe or Canada that wants to buy the hash rate, or you have mining pools bidding against each other for the hash rate. That's really where we would love to see the ecosystem go, is all the miners are pushing their hash rate to an open hash rate grid, and then all the pools are bidding against each other to buy the hash rate.
Well, even with miners now, you have different miners that are essentially paying different prices for hash rate. They're willing to go up to a certain amount, and the ones that pay lower amounts set those they're able to set that up. They stay in business longer, but when things are competitive, they're not generating hash rate, and so you create a market that allows people to operate at whichever layer that they want to at any given point in time.
And they get to hedge their risk, right? They get to decide that, I built out a 10 exahash facility and I want to sell 5 exahashes a year into the future because I'm going to hedge my risk.
Gotcha.
So it's a ability for a miner to get liquidity, so they don't have to just borrow. They can borrow into the future. We can leverage that through smart contracts. So this is completely decentralized. This is completely trustless, and it's all done in code.
How do people get a hold of you? If they went who's the ideal person to reach out to you? Like, hey Ryan, I need you to. This sounds really interesting. How do I get involved with? Bringing this onto my mining facility.
You can just look us up, Titan.io. That's probably the easiest, Titan.io. Lumerin.io, Lumerin.io is the project. You can look me up on Twitter, look Titan up on Twitter. I mean, we're all over the place, but Titan.io is probably the easiest one to remember.
Okay, and then the ideal person to reach out to you, best
you can email me, I'll email you back.
Okay.
We're still, that's the other thing about this industry in general is like we're still, we're working with people that we like to work with. We're still friends, we haven't gotten so large to where it's like you can still email the CEOs of these companies. You can still run into them at conferences and
just have conversations, interview them.
Just interview them. We're still a small community.
And you've been in the space for a while. You've been in the space for a while. You've seen from the very beginning, kind of early on.
From late 2012.
2012. So you've kind of seen the entire cycles over and over. And
I thought I was late when I got in. Bitcoin ASICs were already being pre-ordered, and I was just like, oh man, I missed it. I think Bitcoin was like $12 a coin or something like that, and everyone was telling me, oh man, it used to be like a couple of cents.
Right. So
and it was. I felt like so late to the party. Like, how am I just now hearing about this? All my friends already seem to know about it from the forums.
It's really interesting, with the recent wipeout in the market and things adjusting. It's kind of fertile ground for builders to build and innovation's always happening. I think we were talking a little bit earlier, throughout history, right? You think, oh, hey, I'm late to something, or history's always evolving, technology's always evolving, and it's going to be no different than this space. You talk about 2001 and the tech build, and just all the innovation that came after it.
Honestly, Tesla was late to the car industry.
That's good. Elon was late to the party.
He was late to the party, but did it matter? Right? Like That's the great thing about, especially the Bitcoin industry, is we're dealing with a technology that the world hasn't dealt with yet, and we're just now getting into things that before weren't even possible. The idea of having a digital commodity wasn't possible before. The idea of having a currency not backed by any government, a trustless currency, wasn't possible before. We have a trustless settlement system. We have just we have incredible opportunity to build on this technology. So, we talked about this earlier, was this idea that a lot of people are recirculating the same ideas that, I had written papers, my friends had written papers back in 2013, 2014, and we're seeing a lot of these ideas actually resurface in other projects. And people are kind of milling around and coming up with kind of like the same patterns, and they're solving different problems now. But we still have hundreds of years of innovation to be built on top of this space. And just like when I said, Tesla was late to the car industry. Well, we don't know what, blockchain solution is going to pop up in 20, 30, 40 years that could completely revolutionize, what we see in the industry. Right now, I would liken us to, cars and airplanes, where, back in 1920, if I tried to explain to you what an airport was going to look like in 2022, and if I said, oh yeah, you're gonna wait in line at these checkpoints called TSA checkpoints, and you're gonna have to like take off your shoes and go through these things called X-ray machines, and a lot of people in this world are going to live their lives flying from city to city to city around the world to talk about the different things they're working on, and by the way, like, this is what these companies look like, and they're publicly traded, and this is what the support services look like, and these are what the
the payment systems,
and the airline miles and the credit cards that all the airlines have. Like, and if I try to explain to you what this all looked like in 2020 or 1920, you would have thought I was like absolutely insane. Because at the time, like, the airplane had just been practically just been invented. Like, they're like, wait, that flying contraption, like, that you're really like, you're going to have entire industries and people literally living their lives on these things. Like, that's ridiculous.
And especially at that point when it just comes in, you only see the problems that are right in front of you, and there are so many assumptions that are built in that say, hey, this is not possible.
Yeah.
And human innovation, right? We've proven through history, things continue to evolve. What we think is impossible today, happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I forget who said this, but it's the science, if evolved enough, is indistinguishable from magic, right?
Yeah.
And their technology is indistinguishable from magic.
So like right now we have a digital ledger that produces a block every 10 minutes. It's currently the leading digital ledger. It's the market cap of Bitcoin is larger than the other top 100 coins combined. Mm-hmm. So it's by far the ledger. We've already proven that this ledger every 10 minutes can come to consensus on adopting a block. And people are running nodes all over the world. Now, the problem we have is each block is 1 megabyte, so we have a size constraint. We have a transaction throughput constraint. We have a lot of constraints with this current technology. It doesn't mean that those constraints are always going to be there, right? Like, the airplane flying over the Atlantic used to be like a huge ordeal, before the jet engine, and we just don't know what new technologies, what new communication channels we're going to have a decade from now that's going to build on top of this idea of distributed consensus. There's algorithms that haven't even been invented yet. There's ways of coming to consensus and adopting blocks onto a chain, and larger blocks and more data. I mean, we could get to the point where we have like 1 terabyte blocks, and it's nothing to us because it's being streamed through, quantum mechanic entanglement theory. Like literally, like there's so many things that we're still like exploring in the world of science that you're right. Eventually, if we look through a portal 50 years from now, we're going to think it was bloody magic.
And now people are Googling quantum.
It's fascinating.
What's really interesting is when you look at all of it, it kind of comes full circle where we're talking about the individual. One, we don't understand all of technology. We don't understand the world, and it's there's so many aspects of it that we don't quite that we don't know. We think we know to a certain point, but there's so much that's still to be discovered. And it's the same way with the individual. What is the individual going to come up with? And as that's understood, is there going to be an individual that comes in and revolutionizes how that information and how that process is used? and some other, marries it to some other aspect of technology or science.
There's innovation in combining technologies. There's innovation in coming up with new technologies, and I feel like right now we're kind of in this space in blockchain where we're combining technologies. So you have a lot of new projects coming on board where they're borrowing pieces from other projects. They're the zero knowledge proofs and the all the different aspects where they're seeing pop up in other chains and other projects, and we're kind of getting like these Frankenstein monsters projects, and people are kind of iterating on it, and they're learning what works and what doesn't work. So we're still learning to walk as an industry. We're still learning what works, what's going to survive, what's beneficial. We went through like the a lot of crazy periods of people putting like VR on the blockchain and Teletubbies on the blockchain or whatever. They were just wanting to shove everything on the blockchain because that was the buzz.
That's how you raise capital.
That's how you raise capital, right? And NFTs and ICOs and all this stuff. But there are still projects out there that are innovating, and they actually have like legitimately unique ideas that haven't been done before. And some of the coolest projects that we're going to see hit this industry, like most of the people haven't even heard of them yet.
And it's some guy, one or two guys in a room coding, looking at a problem, looking at it, flipping it over. How are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
And it's the guys that are actually solving problems that are going to build that innovation. It's not the guys that are out there today saying, "Hey, I know everything." Put your money over at this company, or no. They're touting the latest and greatest as the end all be all, and without that element of self-doubt and exploration, because that's really what it comes down to. Is when you're building something and innovating something, it's that exploration, that sense of curiosity, pulling on that thread and then building something from
imagination.
Imagination.
Like if you have not like researched the history of the television, like look up like who invented the cathode ray tube. Like a lot of like our technology that we take for granted today was like invented by like a 14-year-old kid.
It like, blows my mind.
Right? Like it's so, and that's why I'm thinking about my kids. I have 3 sons. I'm just like, I don't want them to lose their wonder. I don't want them to lose their imagination, because if they keep that, technology will eventually catch up to their imagination. Or like if they can understand the general principles of electron flow and how transistors work, and maybe they're going to think of something someone else hasn't thought of.
Well, they're not pigeonholed into specific thinking models.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
there's a way that you can nourish their sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
And then they look at it. It's like looking at it from a fresh perspective. You get a fresh pair of eyes looking at something. And I think we're both big into homeschooling. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Yeah. You look at some through history, some what people have accomplished at fairly young ages, 15, 16-year-olds, that they did it at that age, and you look back and nobody knows that. You think, hey, they need what is it? How many years of programming are we up to now? 18 years of programming. After they do 18 years of programming, then they can be a productive member of society, and that's
it's nonsense, because like honestly, anyone with just some imagination and some critical thinking can sit down and look at almost any system in our world and realize how terribly designed or inefficient it was, right? Like, I've had issues with telemarketers recently, where literally I'm getting so many telemarketers calling my phone, and I'm just like, why can these people contact me? This is a terrible system that anyone with this number can bother me right now. Yeah. How do we fix this system? How do we fix banking? How do we fix
You're gonna put a whole political political texting machine out of business,
right? Like how
that's a worthy goal.
How can anyone with a check from me that has my routing number and my account number all of a sudden do ACH fraud, and they can empty my account? Like how is this the world that we live in, that we've gotten this large with these terrible systems? And this is what we're here to disrupt. We're here to disrupt banking. We're here to disrupt communications. We're here to disrupt identity, and we can do that through these trustless systems.
And we were talking a little bit earlier on the pool side. It's necessity is the mother of invention, and it's when really bad things happen that we learn, oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't do it that way. And I think kind of come full circle on the pool side is, hey, we have 2-3 institutions that run the pools, and that'll be fine until it's not, and something will come out that it'll be after the fact that incentivizes people to do it, and the people that are proactive, they'll be in a good spot. They'll be further on down the path.
And let's not forget what we're doing here. Like, we are redefining a banking system. We're redefining a financial system that majority of it we were born into. We didn't choose this system, right? This is hundreds of years of traditional banking, traditional finance, and we are turning it on its head. Like, if you have Cash App, if you have Venmo, if you have one of these payment systems, and you want to send someone $5,000, you're like, oh, this is my money, it's in my account, and I need to, pay my rent, I need to pay my, whatever, I want to send a family member a gift. Guess what? You can't do it. It'll stop you. Yeah. And it'll say, oh, you have a $2,000 a day limit. I'm like, okay, well, I'll send them, $2,000 today or $2,000 tomorrow or whatever, and then eventually you're going to realize, oh no, you have a $5,000 a week limit, or you have this limit, you have that limit. And then I started realizing, like, how do I actually own my money? And the reality is if you're not in crypto, if you don't own your own keys and you're inside the banking system, then you're inside of the banking rules. And they control what you do. They control how you do it. And
it's kind of like when you're growing up and your parents said, my house, my rules.
Yeah. And you don't have this little thing called sovereignty. And that's what crypto is about. That's what this entire industry is about, is sovereignty. Where we have governments, and this was a big part of why the U.S. became the U.S., was this idea of individual sovereignty and freedom. And we've lost sight of that. And I'm not running for politics, this is not my platform, but literally, like, what we are doing with crypto is we're reestablishing sovereignty of the individual to own their own currency, to be able to own their own identity, to be able to control
what comes
assets.
down to freedom, right?
It's freedom.
It's freedom, and that when people say they have that trigger word of sovereignty, or hey, you're against the state, or it's like, no, I just want to be free. I want to be able to produce my own, I want to be able to produce something. I want to be able to keep my production. I don't want someone showing up with a gun to take it, or force it. It's like you have that money, and you don't understand how little you own your money until you send a wire and it gets frozen, and they say, hey, we want all of the records based on this. Who is this Jose Luis? Because they have it on some list from somewhere else that it's.
There is no ownership of your finances at that level. And and I heard someone ask on stage earlier, like, well, what level of decentralization is adequate? Like, what level of decentralization?
Right.
Well, the reality is, what is decentralization? It's basically having enough people where the government doesn't know who to point the gun at. It's like, and if there's no clear leader to be able to take out the entire system, that's decentralization.
Where's the weak link?
Where's the weak link? Is the proper level of decentralization is there are enough people to scatter the risk.
The chain is strong. Every link is strong.
So when it comes to Bitcoin, and we go back to mining pools, why is it important for miners to run their own pool? Is because we got to keep it decentralized. We have to make sure that no government can shut down a pool, no government can shut down a mine, and it ruin the ecosystem.
No entity can shut down the ecosystem.
No single entity can harm the ecosystem. And that's what we have to be focused on. We have to make sure that we stay fully fault tolerant. You could take down any pool, you could take down any mine, a government could take down the top 3 pools, it doesn't matter. We still survive, we keep going.
I think that is like the perfect place to end the interview, but I really appreciate what you're building.
Cool.
And check out what Ryan's building.
Thanks, guys.
I'm Lee Bratcher, the president of the Texas Blockchain Council. Thank you to everyone who came out to this year's summit, helping us make it the best one yet. Now more than ever, we need professional industry associations like the TBC to help craft effective policy instead of the CEOs of centralized exchanges roaming the halls of various state capitals or in DC. Texas is quickly becoming the center of the universe for Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. If you want to be part of the future that we are crafting here in Texas, join the TBC today.